6-foot table talk as we find out who walks the walk. It's the bane of our existence to practice social distance. 6-foot table talk.
Hello and welcome to 6-Foot Table Talk, a series bringing civil discourse and understanding back to the table. My name is Nigel Eastman and I am honored to be your host. But this series is not about me. This series is about the conversation. So let the talk begin. Hello and welcome to this episode of 6-Foot Table Talk. My name is Nigel Eastman and I am with
Rahebi.
And today we're going to talk about health and nutrition. And that being said, we're going to get into this conversation. There's a lot to this conversation, so I'm going to try to keep myself short and let her do most of the talking. Y'all know I'm long-winded. What you also might see is you might see the editor's cut here and the extended version on another platform. But that being said, let's get into this conversation. Miss Kim, tell me, what do you do? Why are you talking to us?
You asked me to.
Straight up.
Yeah. I am an agent with Texas A&M AgriLife Extension Service, and I'm in the Better Living for Texans program. I serve limited resource individuals in Collin County through health education and resource management.
So that's a mouthful.
Yes.
How did you get there? How did you get to that position?
Oh, that's a good question. I was a bench and clinical researcher at UT Dallas for 8 years. I was in the hard sciences, neuroscience and biomedical devices specifically. I was working on a vagus nerve stimulator, if y'all are interested. You can Google me. But during my time there, you do similar things every day for 8 years. You kind of wonder what else is out there, right? So I quietly went to grad school and got a master's in public health, and I got a national board certification in public health. And for fun, I did a graduate certificate in global health and environmental sciences. That last part was a lie. It wasn't for fun. It was because my advisors made me do it. They said it would be good for me, and it was. It served me well. So when I finished my position at UT Dallas, there was a building about 10 minutes away. It was called AgriLife. I didn't know what it was. So I literally went in like it was 1994 and asked to speak to somebody so that I could learn more about what they did. And it turns out they had all these departments, and one of them was family and community health. And I was like, it's right up the alley of my degree. It's something I want to be a part of. And so they assigned me to the McKinney office, which is where I work now. And I started there as a master wellness volunteer for a year. And then they realized they couldn't get rid of me, so they hired me as an agent.
Beautiful.
And now they're really stuck with me.
Now they're really stuck with you. So again, a mouthful.
Yeah.
Like that's a lot.
It's a lot. We don't have a marketing department, as you can tell. Like this is me marketing. Yeah.
Keep it short. No,
Sorry.
you're good. So you talked about kind of your background, your educational background, just a little touch. You mentioned UT Dallas and some of the research, the work that you had done there. What qualifications do you have? Like what degree do you have that got you to where you're at now?
So my main qualification for where I am, it's multifold. It's my master's in public health. It's my national board certification in public health. And the graduate certificate in global health helps a great deal because that is health measures focused on limited resource groups and settings. So that served me very well.
Good for you.
Thanks.
And you set me up well to ask this next question that I kind of glossed over. Yeah. What resources or information do you provide?
So the range of my scope, or the scope of my range, I should say, is health, wellness, nutrition, healthy eating, exercise, but there's also resource management too, right? Budgeting, planning, using your resources in a responsible way, especially as it pertains to grocery shopping, budgeting, paying the bills.
So that's your background, your qualifications, your study, the work that you have done. Let's pivot just a little bit. Okay. We hear what you do. Who do you do that for? Like, who do you serve?
That's a great question. So before COVID, my target audiences were those who were limited resource. That used to be a smaller group. Now, during COVID, because we're still in the thick of it, that group has significantly expanded. So what does limited resource mean, right? I'm not comfortable with using the phrase limited income or low income. It isolates too many people. It abandons a few groups of people.
Mhm.
I prefer limited resource. So people who are limited resource are those who are either receiving or eligible for SNAP or TANF or supplemental security income or some sort of federal or state aid, right?
Mhm.
But I use the term limited resource because there are those who are eligible who do not seek out those services for one reason or another.
Mhm.
And I also serve them. So that makes my audience pool much larger, and then throw in the accelerant of COVID, and it's a lot of people, particularly in Collin County. So I'm assigned to Collin County. I have counterparts in Dallas, Tarrant, and Denton County as well.
Mhm.
And we're all solo agents too. So I'm the only one in Collin County.
Wow. So, I mean, that's a big span to cover for just one individual.
Yeah.
Like, how many people are we talking about?
So we're talking about documented 45,000 people. And when I say documented, I mean the documentation that we have for those who are receiving
Mhm.
SNAP or similar benefits in Collin County.
Uh-huh.
We don't know exactly how many there are who are eligible and not receiving for whatever reason.
Yeah.
I could speculate. It could be double, it could be more, it could be less. But at minimum, it's 45,000 people who are receiving SNAP or similar benefits in Collin County.
And so that's what I was talking about. That's the curveball of this conversation.
Mhm.
We mentioned health and wellness, and
Yeah.
you think we're going to talk about, exercise, eat right, and
Sure.
that's what our conversation is. But
Sure.
really, it's a larger conversation even than just that.
Yeah. We're talking about the barriers to that, aren't we?
Yeah. Very good. That's interesting.
Most people have enough sense as to what they should be doing for exercise and what they should be doing in terms of eating right, eating healthy. And we're probably going to get into this a little bit later, but there are a huge number of barriers to that, and
Mhm.
income is one of them. Resources,
Mhm.
and there's that phrase again, limited resources is another one of them.
Mhm.
It's one of the bigger barriers, I should say.
Well, what I find interesting, and we had this conversation back and forth before this started.
Yeah.
You said to strictly look at finances is a limiting factor.
Yes.
Like it doesn't widen the pool enough.
No.
And that's crazy to me. And not crazy as in, I guess, I couldn't fathom it,
Mhm.
but that there are individuals who do have the resources, like financial
Right.
means, but
Right.
they don't have access to information, or they can't connect themselves with those institutions or with those organizations that you're able to. Like you're kind of like, I
I'm
don't know.
definitely a connector.
Yeah.
For sure. And that was a big reason why I was hired for this position, is because of who and how many people and how many agencies and organizations I was connected to in the community. In fact, that was one of the questions in my interview is,
Mhm.
who do you know? What do you do for them?
Mm-hmm.
And FUMC was one of them. Wesleyan was another one of them.
Uh-huh.
And that's just a few of the groups that I was affiliated with. And so when they hire agents specifically for the Better Living for Texans department, they don't want just anybody off the street. They want someone
Yeah.
who's tied into the community pretty closely.
Yeah.
And it does help if you're tied into the community that you serve pretty closely.
Mhm.
I'm a shadow's breath away from being the audience that I serve.
Mm-hmm.
For a long time there, I was the audience that I served, and then I went to go work at UT Dallas and made very good money, if I may say so myself.
Mm-hmm.
But then the project that I was working on came to a close, and there again, I found myself in a situation where my resources were indeed very limited. But I had an education,
Mm-hmm.
I had a lengthy CV, I had publications, for goodness sake. One wouldn't look at me and assume that I was limited resource. So the face of individuals who are limited resources is no longer what we assumed 20, 30 years ago. It's very different.
Say that again. For real, say that again.
Okay. The face of those who are limited resource is no longer what we assumed they were to be
Yeah.
20 or 30 years ago. They are educated. They do have jobs. They frequently have more than one job.
Yeah.
They are multilingual. There's this assumption that they are Black and brown bodies who may or may not speak English, who have little to no education. That's simply not true.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know when it was ever true,
Mm-hmm.
but I won't argue with those who have that data, but it's not true today.
And now we're living in a COVID time. And we didn't talk about this beforehand.
COVID has shaken things up, man.
Yeah.
Yeah.
An uptick in those people who with limited resources.
Yep.
Because everybody's, not everybody.
Many
forgive me.
people.
Many people. There is a significant number of people who are losing their jobs
Yes.
and finding themselves in a place of limited resource.
Yes. One of the qualifiers that my department allows me to use is I can serve people who get their food from food pantries, right?
Mm-hmm.
How many people do we know today who used to donate to food pantries who are now going to food pantries? I know a few.
Oh,
I
my
bet you know a
goodness.
few.
So I got goosebumps whenever you said that, and not a good kind of goosebumps. Like, that's,
It's problematic.
yeah.
You know, one of the food pantries that our church is affiliated with, Minnie's Food Pantry, they're one of my clients. I serve them.
Mm-hmm.
There's been a huge uptake
Yeah.
of clientele at Minnie's Food Pantry.
So you've mentioned a number of different organizations, food pantries and such. Where do you find, how do you make these connections? Where do you find these connections?
A lot of it is good old-fashioned networking, a lot of cold calling, cold emailing, randomly showing, not randomly, I do announce myself beforehand. It's just that nobody replies to my emails. Showing up with like a marketing packet to tell them who I am, what I do, why I do it, and what I can do for them. And hopefully they'll be interested in partnering with me. It's very organic for me to partner with organizations and agencies that are doing similar things to what I'm doing. So the food pantries, right? Or the shelters. We've got the Samaritan Inn. We've got Bella House that serves pregnant mothers. We've got, what is that one shelter called in Plano that serves youth? City House.
Mm-hmm.
They're good partners as well. So we've got all these partners that do similar things in terms of service to those who are at a disadvantage right now or have been. So me partnering with them seems very natural and very organic. It's just that sometimes I don't hear back from them.
Yeah.
I call, I email. I do 3 of each, and then I try to show up. The showing up part has been made very difficult because of COVID. It's almost impossible to just show up at someone's door. I also partner with our Title I schools. They have been wonderful partners to me, in particular Sigler and Barron Elementary School. And I want to reach out to Memorial because they are one of the affiliated schools with our church.
Yeah.
So hopefully that affiliation will help me get into the door. So affiliations help. Having individuals like you on my committee, because I do have that sounding board committee, individuals who are closely tied into the community who can tell me, Kim, I have an in with, let's just say, Memorial.
Yeah.
Let me introduce you so that you're not knocking on a door that may or may not open. The ghosting, it's not intentional. It's not malicious. It's that these agencies are just as strapped and tired and run ragged as I am. They're doing the best that they can. And I'm sure they're being approached by other groups like North Texas Food Bank, who does wonderful work. It's hard to keep up. And they're also limited in terms of personnel.
Yeah.
You've got one person like me serving tens of thousands, sometimes more. It's a lot of work. It's a lot of hard work.
You used a term that our audience might not know, ghosting.
What do you mean they won't know? Are we aging ourselves? Is that what's happening? What do the kids say now?
Maybe both ways,
Okay.
aging ourselves. What do you mean by ghosting?
So like I'll call or I'll email and I'll show up and I never get a response or a reply. I never hear back. Or if I do hear back initially after a while, I won't hear back again. So that's what I mean by ghosting.
So
It's a dating term.
you mentioned some of the partners of this church, and let me address the camera for a second. The vision of this church is connecting God and grace to self and community.
That's right.
And Kim's an attendee of this church.
Yes. 8:30 service.
Awesome. So this is an important conversation, and I hope that people watching this maybe even take notes, run this tape back, listen to it again, because we connect God and grace to self and community.
That's right.
So you're very well connected and provide a lot of information for a lot of people. Again, those limited resource individuals. Does that mean you know everything? Do you ever have to outsource this information? Like, I don't know that answer. You got to talk to so-and-so.
Yes, so I do have to outsource sometimes, especially when it comes to clinical care, because I am not a clinician.
Right.
I do not have a license to practice. Now, that being said, a lot of my audiences, especially if they lose their jobs, they have lost their health insurance.
Yes.
So I can't just be like, go to McKinney-Presby. No, that's no longer a feasible option anymore. I do have a list of clinics in my back pocket, including the county health department, which have been awesome partners to me, but also Hope Clinic, Community Clinic. There are a few clinics in the community that do serve limited resource individuals for little to no cost. So I have them in my back pocket. What I try to do, though, is not pass the buck, if at all possible. If a person in front of me expresses the need for clinical care, or I perceive that they need clinical care, I'll share that information for sure. Absolutely. But it's part of my job to make sure I'm sharing as much educational information for that person to make healthier choices for themselves. So I try to do that to the best of my ability. And that's another reason why I was hired. They're not going to, again, just hire anyone who needs to be told what to do. You have to, as an agent, be very resourceful. And I'm not just talking about Googling, because you could type whatever you want into the internet. If you don't know if that source is legitimate, then you're doing a disservice to your clientele. So you have to know what's good information and what's questionable information. So a lot of my sources, for example, are my funders, right? USDA, FDA, CDC, a lot of universities like Harvard, Public Health Extension, they do amazing work. So that's where I get a lot of my information from, are these government and university sources, and some organizations too, like the American Heart Association or the American Lung Association, because the information that they put out is sound as well, and I'm comfortable sharing it. But if it's, and I'm not trying to diss mommy blogs, because I frequent them for other reasons, but that would not be a source that would be appropriate for me to share.
Right.
So
I get that. So you mentioned it. You talked about some of your funding. How are you funded?
I'm funded through the USDA, through the Supplemental Nutritional Assistance Program, SNAP. So SNAP, there is a pot of money. It's grant money, and it funds people in my position.
Okay, so we went back and forth on this question.
Yes, we did.
Should we talk about this or should we not? So you've got funding.
Yes.
You are, and I don't want to misspeak. You're spending your salary is taxpayer dollar.
Most things are.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
So grants, so public grants like this, where do you think the money comes from? Besides, well, the U.S. Mint, right?
Yeah, right.
But that money has to come from somewhere.
Yes. So
it comes from you and me.
I'm stumbling over my words because this is such a touchy.
It's delicate.
It's a delicate question.
It's delicate. People wonder, well, why should I? Or
Yeah.
why am I? Why is my money? How much money do you think comes out of our pockets for this grant?
Yeah.
I don't have an exact dollar amount, but I'm willing to bet you it's in the cents.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. For sure. So the next question is, what those individuals who need assistance, who found themselves out of work, what about the argument that says they're lazy, they need to go find a job, they need to get a computer, you pull yourself up by your bootstraps, which that might be aging me that I just said that.
That's very,
What about the argument that those individuals can work their way out of this? They're just lazy.
They are working their way out of this. Most of my clientele, I would argue, I wish I had a percentage to share with you. The majority of my clientele work more than one job.
Yeah.
And that mindset is so narrow. It's so old-fashioned. It's so incorrect and damaging. Can I say that?
Yeah.
It's very damaging.
Okay.
And it only serves to make that person who feels that way feel better about themselves. It does not solve the problem. I feel very strongly about that narrative. It really gets me angry because I see how hard these people work. I see how smart they are. I see how loving and how hard they try.
Yeah.
They're only doing their best. And nobody asks to get laid off. I sure didn't ask to get laid off of a job that I loved. And it put me in a situation that I was not happy to be in, but I did my best to get out of it, and I did. And there is this misnomer that a lot of my clientele are going to be repeat clientele. No. I see them for a season, and then they disappear. They're gone because they're no longer limited resource or consider themselves to be limited resource. These are very hardworking people.
Yeah. So you said that individuals that you might see are working a job, might be working two jobs.
Often.
And
can I interject really quick?
Please.
That's been one of the biggest challenges of my job pre-COVID.
Yeah.
Is that I lacked access to a lot of these individuals because they worked so many jobs.
Yeah.
Because they're not able to come to my class on a Tuesday at 1:00 in the afternoon. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
And so when I started rolling out online content because of COVID, silver lining to everything, y'all, all of a sudden they have access to my stuff at 2:00 in the morning when they get off work, which is fine by me.
Wow.
And then I get an email asking me a question about the content at 4:00 in the morning, and I'm happy to answer it at 6. Yeah.
And so that was the element that I wanted to walk towards.
Okay.
And
I interrupted you. I'm sorry.
No, and that's fine. You answered it, and you answered it well, perfectly. Thank you very much. And the fact that people just don't have time. If you're working two jobs, you don't have time to go to a class, and that makes you a limited resource individual. You don't have access to your information because you don't have the time to go to it.
Would you agree that time is a resource?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes, for sure.
Who has more of that resource limitation than those who work 2 or more jobs.
For sure.
When we're just talking about work, we're not even talking about the fact that they go to school
Yeah.
or they have children or they're
Yeah.
sandwiched like I am and caring for elderly parents or someone else as well.
Wow. So
There's another term, sandwich kids. It's when you have kids and you're taking care of adults in your life.
So that being said, final question.
Okay.
To boil all of this down as best as you can to an overall problem, what do you think the overall problem is? With limited resources or in terms of nutrition, what is the overall problem?
The big picture problem, broadly speaking, as an agent, is poverty. That's way too vague though, right? Isn't it? So if I were to put on my public health hat, because I do have that credential, poverty is so multifaceted, it's so complicated that I would, and I've mentioned this to you before, I would love to have an economist or 3 to sit down with some public health individuals and some healthcare individuals to hash out the integration of economics and poverty and health and how they all play out together. So if we were going to talk about poverty, then we have to talk about wage stagnation. We have to talk about minimum wage. We have to talk about student debt and medical debt and the increasing cost of living. Collin County is a very expensive place to live.
For sure.
It's a very expensive place to live. We have to talk about divorce, and that kind of raises some eyebrows. Divorce is a very expensive financial prospect. How many people are getting divorced today?
Yeah.
Depending on your data source, it's about 40. Another data source puts it at 60.
Yeah.
That's very expensive, and that affects generations.
For sure.
That doesn't just affect that
Yes.
generation right then and there. We have to talk about the increasing cost of education and how education is now more than ever one of the biggest barriers to improved work
Yeah.
and improved wages.
I got a lot of comments on that. That's another table talk.
That's gotta be. It's an important thing to talk about. We can't just throw out there that, oh, the problem is poverty and oh, poverty is multifaceted and all right, everybody have a great day. No, that has to be discussed and that has to be understood.
So you said you would love to have an economist be
Or
at
3.
this or 3. So I want to ask you
Because
about
they're all
or 3.
going to have a different viewpoint.
Yes.
Yeah. They're all going to say something different about the same topic.
Yeah.
And I would argue all of them are going to be right,
Whew.
which is real frustrating, man.
Yeah. Any final words? Any positive note spin that you would like to throw out there before we end our time together?
Yes. There are people, I don't want to say people like me, there are people in this world who want to help others. And I thank God for them. We have to serve each other. I struggle with my faith. You know this. I struggle with my faith. I come to church, I read scripture, but I struggle with my faith. And I often wonder, why am I here? And the best default that I have is to help and serve others until something more clear is revealed to me. And if nothing more clear is revealed to me, that is fine, because to help and serve others is the best thing that I have. And I'm very, very grateful and blessed.
6 foot table talk as we find out who walks the walk.